2, 1.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to this webinar. This is the fourth in the series of webinars by Dr. Maijna. And good morning, Dr. Ivan.
Good
and
morning.
It's great to have you with us. And we will be, And Ivan will be taking us through weekly presentations today and how he can get you to, how they can lead you to a lot of referrals. Just for everybody's information, this webinar has been created for BNI India. The content of this, Ivan has been working on it, bits and pieces of it over a period of time, and he's actually put this together, and we are really fortunate to be hearing this for the first time ever, and we're lucky that BNI India members get to hear it for the first time. So just another request, if some of you are watching in groups, please do send me the pictures on WhatsApp, and Ivan would definitely like to have them with him and share it on the social media. So we won't hold Ivan back any further. Ivan, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's morning for me here in Austin, Texas, and it's evening for you. I think we're about 12 hours apart. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to everyone again. Listen, I know I've said this before, but I've got to say it again. I am so incredibly proud of BNI India. You are now really close to 300 chapters. 300 chapters. I think you're sitting at about 289 right now. 12,900 members, almost 13,000 members, and you have an average number of members per chapter of over 44, which is just incredible. I'm so pleased with BNI India and looking forward to coming back and visiting your country again. Today I do have a presentation. It's called Weekly Presentations That Get You Referrals. And obviously, having done this now for 32 years, I've seen a lot of the weekly presentations, what we used to call 60-second presentations. I've seen them done well, and I've seen them done very badly. And so what I want to talk about today are some of the things that I've seen that I think have been very, very effective. I welcome your questions. I will be taking questions at the end of my presentation. The only dumb question is the unasked question, so whatever you would like to ask, please put it up there. And if you would like for me to unmute you so you can ask your question out loud, I'd be happy to do that. Just simply put your question and say you have a microphone on your computer and you'd love to ask the question. And I'll unmute you and see if we can hear you. Otherwise, I'll just read your question out loud and do my best to answer your question. This is being recorded and it will be made available. And right now, this is open to members in India. So please don't raise your hand if you have a question. Just send me the question via the questions bar. Okay? I think that's everything. I've got probably about roughly 30 minutes worth of material and then plenty of time to do Q&A. Let's get started on doing the weekly presentations. I don't know if you've noticed, but about a year or so ago, we changed from talking about 60-second presentations to weekly presentations. And India, honestly, is one of the reasons why we've made that change, because the chapters worldwide have become larger and larger. India clearly leading the way in very large chapters, and it's impossible to get a meeting over when you have everyone doing 60-second presentations. When you have 50, 60, 70, 100 members in a chapter, it's almost impossible. So we've switched the 60-second presentation to weekly presentations, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here today. The first item that I would like to talk about is here we go, a podcast that I did. Now, this was some time ago. This was 6 years ago that I did this podcast, but the story is great, and I recommend this podcast for the story. You'll see that back in 2010, we were still calling them 60-second presentations, but this is the same topic. It's a weekly presentation, and it's a great example. Episode number 182, the best weekly presentation I ever heard. And it's a story about a florist who did a brilliant, absolutely brilliant job of breaking their business down to the least or lowest common denominator. Now, least or lowest common denominator is a term in mathematics. And the idea with it is to break a number down to its smallest component. And so I'm using that term as it relates to BNI and as it relates to networking in the sense that if you can effectively break your business down into its lowest or smallest component, you're going to be much, much more successful in generating referrals for yourself by breaking it down. And this is counterintuitive. There's so many things that are counterintuitive in BNI because what happens is people want to stand up and they want to say everything they do. I'm a full service, whatever. I can do anything in my field. I can do this, I can do that. And I'm here to tell you that's a waste of breath. That just won't help you as much as you might think. Instead, what works better, and this is from 32 years of listening to presentations, I'm here to tell you that what works best is breaking your business down into small presentations. Now, someone just said we have 30-second weekly presentations, not 60 seconds. Yes, I'm aware of that. Some have 45, some have 30. We changed it from 60-second presentations as I started in my presentation here. We changed it from 60-second presentations to weekly presentations because the chapters were getting larger and larger. So as you see some of our older material, you're going to see it say 60-second presentations. But that varies depending on the size of the chapter. And that's why we changed the term from 60-second presentations to weekly presentations. Now, however long your presentation is, if you break it down into its least or lowest common denominator, it's going to be a much more effective presentation. So in this podcast number 182, I talk about a presentation that used the least or lowest common denominator that was one of the best I have ever heard, and it is about, it was done by a florist. It's done by a florist. And he stood up in a meeting and he held up a single rose. It was a very small rose, not very large. And he did this entire presentation in less than a minute. He held up a single rose. And the rose was covered in cellophane, unlike this rose in the photo here. It's covered in cellophane, and you could tell that he picked it up at a local grocery store, and he held it up. And he asked everyone in the audience, all the members, what do you think of this rose? What do you think of this rose? And nobody would say anything because they realized that it was from a grocery store and they didn't want to say how good it looked. And he said, it's okay, you can be honest. This is a pretty good looking rose. And I admittedly went to the grocery store and picked this up there. He said, they do a pretty good job at the grocery store, but let me show you my rose that we sell in my store. And he pulled out a long stem rose that was just gigantic. It was easily more than twice as large as the rose from the grocery store. He said, here's my rose. Here's the grocery store rose. He said, I want you to notice something really important. Look how thick the stem is on my rose. And the rose he happened to have, the stem was as thick as my little pinky finger. It was very thick. It was as thick as a pencil. And he said, look how thick the stem is from my rose, and look how thin the stem is from the grocery store rose. And there's a couple of really important things to understand about this. One is that it draws much more water up to the rose, and so the rose will be larger. And in his example, the rose was much, much larger. The bulb was much larger than in the grocery store rose. He says, look how big the bulb is, or look how thick the stem is. It will make a larger flower, and more importantly, it will last 5 to 7 days longer because it draws more water up into the bulb. And he held it from the tip of the bottom of the stem, and he wobbled them both back and forth, and the little grocery store rose kind of flopped back and forth, and his grocery store, his rose from his florist shop stood good and firm because it was a very thick stem. And he said, look at the difference in the stems. I want to tell you that there's only 3 cents, 3 pennies difference in price between these two roses, the grocery store rose and my rose. Only 3 pennies difference in price. Theirs is more. The grocery store rose is more. I thought, wow, this was an incredible presentation. In less than a minute, all he talked about was a rose. That's it. He just talked about a rose. But he was so specific, and he was so clear as to why his roses would be better than buying a rose at a grocery store. I could see him in his floral shop. In my mind, I could see him in his floral shop, training an employee on the difference between a grocery store rose and a rose from his floral shop. He led with talking about value, the value of his product, by showing that for roughly the same price, actually a little bit less, you can get a much better product. In effect, he was using his weekly presentation to train a sales force. And that is what's key in doing weekly presentations. It's not about closing sales. It's about training a sales force. That's what you want to do. Train people how to refer you. And in order to do that, you've got to be crazy specific, really, really specific about what you do. And by being specific, you actually can teach them how to refer you much more effectively. There's something in the brain called the reticular activating system. And the truth is, we're all standing in the middle of referrals. Referrals are all around us. They're everywhere. But we don't tend to pay attention to the referrals. And what I'm here to tell you is that by being specific, it helps people hear the opportunity for referrals. We're all standing in the middle of referrals. There's a thing that I'm going to talk about more in a minute here called your reticular activating system. And it's a filter between your conscious and subconscious mind. It's a filter between your conscious and subconscious mind. It filters out the things you don't need to know or hear. And it screens those things out from all the audio input that comes into your brain. So you're not paying attention to things that aren't important to you, and you're paying more attention to those things that you have decided are important to you. And we do this, our reticular activating system works every day, and we don't even really know it or aren't even aware of it. How many times are you in a large crowd, for example, like an airport? I'm in airports a lot. I travel extensively. And have you ever been to an airport and there's all this noise and people are talking and the loudspeaker is going and babies are crying and there's all of this noise? And then I've been in airports where noise is everywhere, but all of a sudden I hear some flight attendant or employee for the airport say, Mr. Meisner, please come to the front desk. And over the roar of everything else, I picked up my name and paid attention. This is part of what the reticular activating system is. And so there's some science behind what I'm talking about in terms of focus, that if you can give people things to listen for, like your name in an airport, if you can give people things to listen for, then the mind is an amazing thing. And your reticular activating system won't screen those things out. So that when you're doing weekly presentations and you're teaching people what to listen for, they won't screen those things out. Let me give you another story about reticular activating system, and then I'm going to give you some examples. of the kinds of things that you should be talking about. You should be breaking your business down into these least or lowest common denominators. So years ago, many years ago, I could sleep through anything. I mean, I'm telling you, I could sleep through just about anything you could think of. And I once, and this is a true story, although I never slept with a cat on my face. I'm telling you, I could sleep through just about anything. Once, when I was a young man, there was an automobile accident out in front of my house, and it was really loud, and it came up really close to my front door. This isn't a photo of the actual accident, but the car was actually closer to my front door than this. And incredibly loud. The neighbors came out. The police were there. Ambulance was there. I slept through everything. I did not wake up through any of this, and it was right out my front door. I had no idea there was an accident at my house until I walked out of the house the next morning, and as I walk out my front door, I see yellow police tape across my front door because the accident had come up, really close. And I was like, oh my goodness, what happened? And it was amazing that I would sleep through that entire thing. Well, look, I figured, hey, it didn't come through the front door. I didn't need to wake up. It wasn't like it went into the house. So, but when a couple of years later, when my wife and I were about to have our first baby, little girl, I really got nervous because what if she cried at night? What if something was wrong and she would cry? And if there was a problem and she'd cry, what if I slept through it? I couldn't sleep through my baby as she was crying. And I went to bed that night thinking, if you hear a cry, you have got to wake yourself up. And sure enough, middle of the night, there was the baby definitely crying. And it wasn't even a loud cry like this photograph shows a baby, really wailing. It wasn't even a loud cry. It was sort of a little whimper. And as soon as I heard that whimper, the second I heard that whimper, I sat up straight in bed. I nudged my wife. I said, honey, get up. The baby's awake. Now, I know all of you wives out there are thinking, what a horrible man. Wake up your wife. And yeah, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. But think about what I'm talking about here. Just a couple of years earlier, I could sleep through an automobile accident right outside my front door because I just didn't feel I needed to wake up on loud noises. But the first night my daughter is home from the hospital and I heard a whimper, I wake up immediately. We are all standing in the middle of referrals. They are everywhere. They're all around us. And if we can teach people what I call the language of referrals, if we can teach people the language of referrals for us, what is the language of referrals for you? If we can teach people that, then their reticular activating system will open up. And when their reticular activating system opens up, they'll hear your message. Remember, you're trying to train a referral force, a sales force, not try to close sales. It's not about closing sales. It's about teaching people how to refer you. So let's talk about what the language of referrals are. Here are some of the things that are, I believe, the language of referrals. When someone says, I can't, when I'm talking to somebody in a conversation and they use the phrase, I can't, I know that whatever they're going to say next is potentially a referral for someone. And it could be anything. I can't make this computer work. I can't get my website to work. I can't get this pain in my leg to go away. I can't, whatever they're going to say next is going to be a referral for someone. And I need to pay attention to their next words, because if I know someone that can help that person, that's a fantastic referral. So these are some of the phrases of what I would call the language of referrals. Next would be I need. When someone says I need, whatever they're going to say next is a referral for somebody. So if they say, gosh, I need to clean this pool. My swimming pool is, dirty. Hey, I know a great pool service. I use them myself. I highly recommend them. If there's a lot of stuff around the house that has to be done, gosh, I need someone to help fix these things around the house. Hey, I know a great handyman that might be able to help you. So whenever someone uses the phrase, I need, whatever they say next is definitely a referral for someone. I can't, I need. The next one is I want. I can't, I need, I want. Now this one is very clear. When someone says I want, whatever they're going to say next is clearly something that they are looking for, that they want to have, that they want to get. And so when you hear people use those phrases, just open your reticular activating system, open your mind. Listen for those phrases. I can't, I need, I want. And here's the next one. I don't know. I can't, I need, I want, I don't know. When someone says, I don't know, whatever they're going to say next is definitely a referral. Now, there are many other phrases that you can listen for. Here are two others that you can listen for. You want to write them down. I'm thinking about. Oftentimes, whatever someone says next is really a referral for someone. I'm thinking about investing some money in some real estate. Really, I know a great real estate agent. I see them regularly. I'm looking for, that's an obvious one. But it's amazing how we just don't think about these things. And so if you put it in the forefront of your mind, if it's like that situation with me, with my firstborn daughter, where I went to bed at night thinking, if I hear her cry, I have got to wake up. If you train your mind to think of these things, I can't, I need, I want, I don't know, I'm thinking about, I'm looking for, that when people say these kinds of phrases, you just wake up. It's like, okay, what they're going to say next is possibly a referral for someone. And if I pay attention, I'm able to refer them. Now, how does that help you? Here's how it helps you. Teach people what to look for on your products or your services, so that when you're doing your weekly presentation, teach them by saying, if someone says, if you are talking to someone and someone says, I can't, then what I need you to do is to think about what the rest of that answer would be. What is it that someone can't do that you can help them with? And that becomes your weekly presentation. You talk about what people might say if they say, I can't, and then it has something to do with what you do. Or I want, and it's a service that you can provide. I need, I don't know. And be crazy specific, laser specific. Talk about a least or lowest common denominator. Talk about that single rose kind of concept. If you can teach people the language of referrals, these four phrases, the other two I gave you, and you're very laser specific about your communication, I promise you, you are going to greatly increase the amount of referrals that you get in your chapters. There was, I did part of this presentation. I did the LCD presentation once in a region where I just talked about LCDs in the florist. And it was really interesting because someone came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I heard you talk about this when you were in town about a year or so ago. And he said, it really changed my success in BNI. I said, how so? He said, well, I'll show you. He said, our chapter meets on Tuesdays. Pick any Tuesday this year. Just pick a date. So I opened up my calendar and I picked a date. And he said, on that Tuesday, I spoke about this. And he gave me the topic. He said, pick another Tuesday. I said, okay. And I gave him another Tuesday. And he said, okay, on that Tuesday, I spoke about that. I said, all right. And then I picked a Tuesday in the future. I said, all right, here's a Tuesday. He said, okay, on that Tuesday, I'm scheduled to talk about this. I said, what did you do? He said, I heard you talk about the language of referrals and being laser specific. And he said, I did what I call my business 101. Now, I don't know if in universities you do this in India, but in many universities around the world, courses, the beginning course is 101, the second course in the series is maybe 201, the third course in a series is 301, and then the fourth will be 401. So as you go along, you get more and more advanced. And so the idea here is my business basics, my business 101. And I said, well, what did it look like? He said, I broke my business down into 50 little categories, little LCDs. And what I did was I plugged in those topics into my calendar for the next year. I did it at the end of the year. I plugged it in for the next year, one topic each week. And I put it in my Outlook, and I did it with a 24-hour notice so that 24 hours later, I would be reminded of the topic. And then I would just spend a couple of minutes preparing for the topic that day. So I didn't prepare all my weekly presentations at one time. I just did all the topics, and I tried to do it so that it was seasonal to fit my industry. And I said, how has that worked for you? He said, I am now getting 600% more referrals than I did a year ago. And he said, I've been a member now for several years. But the thing that really made the difference was teaching people how to refer me. That's what made the biggest difference. And breaking my business down into their least or lowest common denominators and doing the concept of my business 101, where I'm teaching people the fundamentals of what I do so that they can listen as people are talking to them and give referrals. Now, there's one other topic I want to talk about here, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. And happy to take any question you have. Again, the only dumb question is the unasked question. Murali, feel free to help pick some of the questions if you'd like. But the next thing I want to talk about briefly is the use of memory hooks. And I know in India, you are beginning to, or you have been now for some time, reducing the use of memory hooks. And I think that's a really, really good idea. I created memory hooks, and I'm here to tell you I don't recommend them at a BNI meeting for the most part anymore. Now, a memory hook, if you don't know what I'm talking about, a memory hook is something that in your mind's eye enables you to remember a product or service. One of the first memory hooks I ever heard was before I started BNI, or actually it was just soon after I started BNI. I was at a business event, and everyone had a chance to stand up and do one sentence. There was 100 people in the room, and they couldn't do long presentations. They can only do one sentence. And it wasn't a weekly group. It was actually a Chamber of Commerce meeting. And so, you know, these people didn't know each other. And one man stood up and he raised his right hand as though we were taking the oath of office in the U.S. And he raised his right hand and he said, I believe in the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, which is a common phrase in the U.S. for when people take the oath of office. And everyone laughed and they thought that was funny. I believe in the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, instead of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He was a dentist, and so everybody remembered who he was and what he did. I thought that was very unique, and so I started writing about memory hooks and put them in a couple of books. And I regret it because they became overused in BNI. Memory hooks can be effective really and there's an article, I didn't mention this article, a memory hook doesn't necessarily make a memorable 60-second presentation. You can find this in SuccessNet. I realized I didn't do a podcast. I couldn't find a podcast on this, so I'm going to probably do a podcast on this. I will, of course, change it from a memory hook doesn't necessarily make a memorable 60-second presentation to a memorable weekly presentation. But if you want, you can go to SuccessNet online and select the archive, and you can find this in the archive. Memory hooks, I believe that instead of spending your time and energy making sure people can recite a cute memory hook, educate people about your products and services. You'll receive better results from your fellow members. There's really only one time where I think a memory hook is effective and useful in BNI, and that's potentially visitors' days. Visitors' days where you have a lot of people in the room who don't know you, they might be able to use, or you might be able to use a memory hook as a way of having people remember who you are and what you do. Instead, what's more important than a memory hook is this concept of an LCD or My Business 101. Give them something they can really envision and remember when they find themselves in a position to talk about your business to other people. They're not going to just repeat your memory hook. That does you no good. And you're not teaching them anything with a memory hook. So this is why I don't recommend memory hooks, except for maybe a visitor's day. Instead, I recommend that you teach people the language of referrals and use the concept of My Business 101 and the LCD theories. Do those kinds of things, and you're going to have some great weekly presentations. Memory hooks, as I mentioned, are effective for visitors' days, but I don't recommend that they're used for much else beyond visitors' days. Okay. Well, I estimated that that material would take about 30 minutes, and it has. What I want to do now is to open it up for any questions that you might have. And if you want to speak, again, I'm happy to open up your mic. I'll start with one question, and unless Murali, you have a question that you'd like me to start with.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have this one question which I think would be common to a number of chapters. We have this from Arun Pandit, who's from the Orion chapter in Mysore. Their chapter is now close to 60 members, and he says, managing the time in 90 minutes. He's the president of the chapter. He says it's getting a little challenging, and should it be further reduced by 5 seconds or 10 seconds? What would be your advice on this?
Well, my first bit of advice is to always talk to your executive director before you do anything like this. My inclination would be not to reduce it more. And Raleigh, please feel free to jump in on what you guys recommend, because you have so many chapters that are over 60 members. My inclination is that you reduce the referral part of the meeting, the referral/testimonial part of the meeting down before you cut any more of the weekly presentation. Also, your feature presentation, you can come back a little bit, but you've got to run these meetings with a little bit of military precision. And I have seen groups of 80 members continuing to do 30-second presentations, but boy, you can't let anyone go over 30 seconds. What's your experience been on this one, Murali?
I think that would be ideal. We have a few chapters which have cut back to 25 seconds, but I feel it's more logical to kind of cut back on the feature presentation and make the referrals more crisp.
Yeah, yeah. And are you cutting your referral part down at all in large chapters, 60 member?
Yes, yes. Many chapters they have done that. They make it very crisp and quick.
Yeah.
More so after the online referrals, it's really helpful.
You know, one of the things I've learned is the time expands to fill, time used it gets filled by the time available. So that, you know, if you have an hour and a half, I've seen chapters of 20 members go over time. And they have 20 members. And then I've seen chapters of 60 members stay right on time. So you just got to stay on top of the time and manage the time effectively. So don't let people go over 30 seconds. Don't let people, go over time on their feature presentation either. I think one of the last things you should cut back is your weekly presentation. If at all possible, you need that to really teach people how to refer you. Good question. What other question would you like me to handle next?
We have Krishnamurthy here, who is into textile exports, and he says that based on his weekly presentation, he is getting a lot of unqualified referrals. So he has been trying to use BNI Connect. Mm-hmm. Is there any way we can help him in these weekly presentations? Some of these categories are quite unique. So.
Yeah, I think it's really important to if you're trying to educate people how to refer you and you're not getting qualified referrals, then it's really important to talk about case studies, to come in and say, let me explain what a qualified referral is. Okay, so here's a qualified referral, and then give an example of one, and try to be as specific as you can in the limited amount of time that you have. Sometimes give examples of, so here are some, over the last 3 months, I've talked about examples that are great referrals. Let me give you some examples of things that would not be good referrals. This would not be good, this would not be good, this would not be good. But what I've talked about over the last 3 months, these are kinds of examples. And if you can do case studies where you maybe either bring in samples to show or photographs to show, or if you don't have either of those, a story to share that shows why something is a good type of referral, then you're much more likely to get good referrals. If you're not really clear, you got to imagine these people, they don't know your business as well as you do. So you got to get crazy clear about what makes a good referral for you. And if you're getting bad referrals consistently, chances are really good it's because you're not being clear about explaining what a good referral for you is. Now, if you're reasonably new in the chapter, then that makes sense. It's taking time. It takes time for people to understand. But if you've been in for a while and you're still getting referrals, then you're probably not being as clear as you could be. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. We have another interesting question from Vijay Sham. He says, I tend to add funny dialogues in lots of my presentations, emotionally funny. I'm into property management. Should I limit it?
So he says, funny stories. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, there's nothing.
Funny one-liners. That's what he means. Yeah.
I'm
funny
sorry.
One-liners.
Funny one-liners.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I like humor in my presentations. I generally use humor, certainly in my live presentations. So I recommend the use of humor. Make sure it's always appropriate humor. Humor can be taken the wrong way. It's got to be appropriate. It's got to be, oftentimes I see people use innuendo, or they make it, they'll do risque humor, that's a little off. Bad idea. Do not tell off-color jokes or off-color humor. And I have no idea if you remember it does that. I'm just saying avoid those. Avoid anything that is off-color. Avoid anything that might be offensive. But humor, I love using humor. And so, yes, The one-liners, you got to be really good at them to make a one-liner work, because sometimes people will groan more than laugh. Remember the key is the goal is not to be a stand-up comic. The goal is to teach people how to refer you. Now, if you can do that with a little humor, I think it's a great idea, and I recommend it. Okay, now I see another one, Murali, that I'd like to answer. You can pronounce it. Is it Vignesh from the Jaguar chapter? Does an LCD, should it be changeable 1 week on week or month on month? Vignesh, it should change every week. Every week. You shouldn't be doing the same one. I mean, think about it. Most businesses you can break down into lots and lots of little pieces, really little pieces. So you break that down into small pieces and you talk about that over the course of a year. Then you can break it down into case studies from the kinds of projects that you've done, case studies for the types of clients that you've worked with, case studies for the different geographies that maybe you work with. I mean, I could take any business and break it down into 10 topics in 5 minutes or less in just talking to somebody. So every week should be different. You should not be doing the same thing. I would say for a year, probably. You shouldn't repeat something. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Do you see another one there, Murali, that you'd like for me to?
Yeah. We have Santosh Naidu, who says that how can a lawyer seek a specific referral? My guess is he's coming from their code of ethics, which for some professions does not allow them to ask for business. So is there any way that can be addressed?
Yeah, always follow the ethical guidelines of your profession. So if I'm suggesting something that doesn't fit the ethical guidelines of your profession, don't do it. What I have seen attorneys do in many countries is to use the example of the I can't, I need, I want, I don't know, where you are saying to people, if you have a friend who says, I have this legal problem, I need this relating to an attorney, or I need this, I want this, I've got this problem, and it has to do with this legal issue, and you get really specific. Here's an issue that you might hear. And then each week you talk about a different potential topic. And you tell them if they hear that, that's the kind of thing that you can handle, that you can do for them. And so listen for people who bring that up. I remember once an attorney in a group spoke about a very specific kind of real estate problem that I'd never even heard of before. Never even heard of it. At least I couldn't remember ever hearing of it. And sure enough, 1 month later, I was talking to somebody and he told me about the real estate issue. And it was the same thing that the attorney was talking about. And I thought, wow, I know somebody that can help you with that. And I gave him the referral. And he just talked about it a month before. And it made me wonder how many other people have brought that up over my lifetime. And I didn't even pay attention because I had no idea what it meant. I didn't know what it was. And so this is why being laser specific is really important. And you simply tell people that this is the kind of thing that you do and that you can talk to people about. And that shouldn't cross your code of ethics. Okay, what else?
Yeah. We have Veena here who has a question that's interesting. She's asking whether is it necessary for our success story and the specific ask to be related?
Well, I'm not sure I understand. Are you training people there to do a success story and a specific ask? Because those are two things that I don't necessarily.
Yeah. No, suppose I was to ask for a referral from the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
From hotels or from hospitals. So the success story I shared earlier should have been from a hospital.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps people. Yeah.
I think, listen, if you've only got 30 seconds, I would tighten it up. I would tell the specific service that you're looking for with the hotel industry as one 30-second presentation, and then in another time use the success story as a case study because it might be slightly different. But what tends to happen with most presentations is people try to jam too much stuff into too small a period of time. They try to, it's like putting on a pair of pants that are 2 sizes too small and you're squeezing them in there. And what happens is people try to squeeze too much information into a small time frame. And when they're squeezing too much information into a small time frame, people don't connect the dots. They don't completely understand how that fits. Instead, you want to get really, really narrow, really narrow. Think about the florist. He talked about a rose. That's it. And even more, he mostly talked about the stem of a rose. Not even the rose so much, but how important the stem of a single rose was. And he took up his entire presentation on the stem of a rose and ended it by just saying that they're basically the same price. So what tends to happen is we jam too much into one presentation. My short answer is I would break that up into a couple of presentations. What else?
Yeah, we have Rohan Kamath who has a question here, which I keep coming across regularly. He says, is it okay for me to speak about products or services which we provide, which is which is not represented by me, neither by any other member in the chapter? Like what he basically means to say is that if it is related to his category, but if nobody else in the chapter is representing the category, can I talk about it?
Well, no. If he doesn't represent the category, he should not be talking about it. You really should be you should really be talking about only those categories that you represent. And I would urge a membership committee of a chapter to help make sure that happens. And there are many, many reasons for it, one of which, and I've seen this firsthand, where a category wasn't fully represented in the chapter, but this person constantly talked about it. So that when it came time for someone in that category to join and they tried to join, the person tried to block them because their argument was, I've been talking about that for 6 months. You can't now bring somebody in that profession. And so you need to set expectations from the very beginning and hold to those. So no, stick to your classification, please. There's a great podcast called Classification Cowboys. Go to bnipodcast.com and look it up. Classification Cowboys. It's kind of funny. What else?
Yeah, we have Charan who has a question here that, see, this is a problem that he's coming across where some members focus on selling to the room. But these members also happen to be good givers in the chapter, which means to say they probably give a lot of referrals, which converts to business. And when he tries to get them go for trainings and understand that you should not sell to the room, somehow they don't seem to understand. So he wants to know how he could deal with it.
Well, I would try to get that person to listen to this webinar because you've heard me say several times here, it's not about closing a sale, it's about training a sales force. And so trying to sell to the room is a very bad idea because it limits the power of your network. It limits the power of your network. Now, you may remember I did another webinar for India where I was talking about 3+1 for member success. And if you have, let's do some quick math here. If you have 50 members in a chapter, in that article that I talked about in the webinar, you get this what's called a squared connection effect, where you have those 50 people, and if you have a relationship with all of those 50 people, there's a total of about 2,500 connections. And if you have 2,500 connections and you multiply that by what's called the Dunbar number, which is the total number of people that someone is thought to know personally, and that number is 150, that means you have 375,000 connections sitting in the room. 50 times 50, that's the squared connection effect, times 150, which is the Dunbar number. And if I'm going too fast for you, go back and listen to that webinar and read the article that I did in SuccessNet called 3 + 1 = member success. So 50 times 50, squared connection effect, times the Dunbar number, 150. That means that sitting in the room of 50 people, imagine in your mind's eye, 50 people in a room, and imagine all of the people sitting behind those 50 people. There is potentially 375,000 people sitting in that room with the contacts in that room. All of the different people and all of the different people they know. And that doesn't even talk about the people that they know. This is just one generation away from you. You're looking at potentially 375,000 connections. If you sell to the room, you're selling to 50. If you sell to the people they know in the room, you're selling to hundreds of thousands. And the way to do it is to teach the people in the room how to refer you. So selling to them is very short-sighted. Training them how to listen for referrals is very smart. And that's the way you want to do it. So have them listen to this webinar where I talk about this, and I think you'll find that that'll help them. And by the way, I didn't get that when I started BNI. I didn't understand that. I was totally selling to the room because I didn't know any better. We all do dumb things when we don't know any better. And so I learned over time that the best thing to do is to teach people in the room how to refer me. And if, oh, by the way, they could use my services, they would tell me for sure. But if I could teach them how to refer me, I get both. I get them to buy my product or service if they need it, and I get them to listen to the language of referrals. Okay, I hope that answers your question. There are some things that I'm, hey, look, maybe this will work, maybe this won't work. This is not one of them. I am telling you the best thing to do is to teach people how to refer you, not to sell to the room. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Thanks.
Okay,
what else?
Then, we have a couple of questions which relates to props. We have a member here who says, we have Brinda who says that I'm an image consultant and can I use images during my weekly presentation? We do have a couple of other questions also which talks about showing props. So they just, you would like to know whether it's okay to show props.
Not only is it okay, I think it's brilliant. I think you definitely want to show props. Now, remember, you've got a time frame, so, stick to the appropriate amount of time you have, but absolutely positively showing photographs, showing samples, handing them out, passing them around, anything that people can see, feel, or touch, or smell. If they can see it, touch it, smell it, it's another way to remember the conversation. We all learn in many different ways. Some of us are audio learners. We learn from what we hear. Some people are visual learners. We learn from what we see. And so there are different ways to learn. Some people learn through interaction more effectively, conversation. So there's a lot of different ways to learn. And the more ways that you can use, the better. Bringing in props and samples are great. And you can even do that when you're not in a business that has samples. You can bring in case studies. I mean, if you're a contractor and you're building homes or you're repairing homes, you can't bring in a home, but you can bring in photographs. And so, yes, short answer is definitely.
Yeah.
What else?
There's another interesting question from one of our directors, Atul Joglekar. He says some of the chapters use a slideshow to display members' information when the members are doing their weekly presentations. Is it a good idea to use it, as it is distracting, whether to look at the slide or listen to the member? Because in India we have some other chapters which run a slideshow which puts the member's picture and something about him as the presentations go on. Is that okay? Is that a good idea?
Now, are we talking about the weekly presentations or the feature presentations?
Yeah.
I've seen
weekly presentation.
Wow, weekly. Yeah, I wouldn't use it on a weekly presentation. I'd use it on a feature presentation. If you have 5 or 10 minutes, I would use it there. I wouldn't use it on a weekly presentation, not usually. Only on a rare, if there's something you really want everyone to see, like maybe you're going to show some photographs. Okay, then possibly then. But remember, there's always issues with technology when you're trying to do that kind of thing. So I would probably bring photographs to hand out. If you only have 30 seconds, you don't have much time to do it. If you have longer, I would definitely use PowerPoint. I mean, like with this webinar, obviously there were PowerPoints that went to the topic. Now, if you go through and look at you look at the slides I used, you'll notice that I have very little verbiage on my slides. It's almost all photographs and screenshots. Now, there's a book I recommend that will help improve your PowerPoint presentations. It's called Presentation Zen, Z-E-N, Presentation Zen. It's a very good book on how to take presentations with a lot of content and make it much more visual. And so if you're going to use any kind of slides, take a good look at that book, Presentation Zen. It's a very small book and a lot of visuals that will help you. Hopefully that answers your question. What else?
Ivan, we are just 2 minutes away. Would you like to take one last question, or would you like to wait for closing remarks?
I would love to take one more question.
Okay. This is from a member who is in a chapter of 86 members, and he says that they find it, some of the members find it difficult to cover all the points to be covered, like the introduction, the business category, the LCD, and then the specific ask, and then again close with the name and company name. Any suggestions? For people who are finding it difficult?
I think the most important thing to know is the LCD. If I could only do one thing, that's what I would do. Ending with your company name is pretty, that takes a second, so I wouldn't worry about that. But the specific ask, I think the specific ask can be replaced by the LCD. I think, the problem with the specific ask is that if you do that every week, you're then going to get in the habit of trying to sell to the room. But there are times when a specific ask can be really powerful. For example, I need to meet Mr. Patel, the owner of this hotel nearby, where we have a specific name, a specific hotel location, a specific need, then asking for that very specific referral is valuable. But otherwise, I think the most important thing, hands down, is breaking your business down. You want to sharpshoot your presentation, not shotgun it. So, narrow it down and be more specific. That would be my advice. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Any other,
So
lots of questions asked, everybody, and I appreciate all the questions. I wish I could answer them all. Any other question that you think is critical there, Murali? If not, I'm going to wrap up.
yeah, I think we can wrap up now. It's 9 o'clock now, so
Okay.
I think it's about an hour since we started.
Let me give you one last slide here. I don't think I've used this on any of the webinars I've done for India yet, and I love this concept. And it goes like this. Imagine that you start with a bar of iron. Just a plain bar of iron, like that bar of iron on the top left of the screen that you see there. And if you take that bar of iron is worth, this is a few years old, but it's worth about, in US dollars, about $5. Imagine you can take that bar of iron and turn it into horseshoes. If you take that bar of iron and turn it into horseshoes, it's worth about $50. If you take that bar of iron in the top left and you turn it into screwdrivers, really high quality screwdrivers, it's worth about $500. If you take that bar of iron and you turn into needles, sewing needles, that bar of iron is worth almost $4,000 in sewing needles. If you take that bar of iron and you turn it into balance springs for a watch, that same bar of iron is worth almost $300,000. A BNI membership is the same for everyone. It is our bar of iron. What we turn it into is highly dependent on how we use that bar of iron. And the more effectively we can use that membership, the more money we can turn that into for our businesses. And so it is so incredibly important to go to meetings prepared, where you've thought things through. Don't just go through the motions. Don't just show up every week and go through the motions. Be prepared. It doesn't take a lot of work to prepare for your weekly presentation. Go in with a plan, create a plan for the year, go in with a plan for the week, and hit that every single week, remembering that you're there to train a referral source or a referral team, not there to just make sales. And if you do that, you can turn that bar of iron, that membership, into something very, very valuable for you and BNI. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone for spending this hour with me. I hope you walked away with some great ideas. This has been recorded. I will make it available to Murali, and he'll send that out as he sees appropriate. And I hope to see or talk to you all again on a future webinar. And it is my goal, hopefully, if possible, to be in India in 2017. It was wonderful talking to everyone today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivan, and we look forward to your next webinar very soon. And thank you, everybody, for attending. And we'll catch up in the next webinar. Thank you.
And send him your photographs. I love seeing those. I'll put them on my social media, I promise.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.